Well, can you hear me? Bro, people were saying they can hear me. I don't understand why you can't hear me. I can't hear you now either. Alright, now I can hear you. Alright, can you hear me? Tyler. Bro, what the fuck is going on? I think people in the comment section can hear me, so I don't know why you can't hear me unless your shit took a shit.
I just gotta worry.
So it was all you this whole time, wasn't it?
I don't know about that, but
Well,
I don't
fuck.
know how you shut down my Bluetooth speakers, but somehow you did it.
Okay, well, it might have been because someone said something about the audio, so I went and I moved my mic and I accidentally hit the button, and then
Mm.
maybe that shut your speakers off, so whatever. At least you got your fucking speakers working, asshole.
As
Hopefully
soon as
people
you fucked with something, it all went to shit.
hopefully people can rejoin. It looks like people are already starting to. Um, but anyway, we'll get back to where we were. So where we were was you were talking about basically why you started with a 9mm can and how it was kind of, low hanging fruit on the tree, basically. Go a little
Right.
bit deeper into that.
I think everybody thinks that like the Obsidian or the Mod 9 are like the top cans out there. I would say the Obsidian is probably the most selling top 9 mil can out there, followed by, probably some Silencer Co cans. But I think that the Mod 9 was starting to make an uprising just because it has, good tone to it and everything like that, but no one had real numbers to back it all up. So I think that same thing with Subgun, because obviously we started with the RS9 first. I think yeah, of course it was my fault. But I think the
It is your fault.
RS9.
Your speaker's disconnected.
That is what. Did you mute yourself or did they go out again?
I had it muted there for a second.
No, okay.
Just continue talking. Keep telling what you were saying.
But yeah, we were going after the Wolfman. That was our main concept when we first started, going after the Wolfman. And then the RSP was to go after the Mod 9 Resilient. I mean, the Obsidian, sorry.
Well, I mean, you say that everyone thinks Mod 9 and Obsidian were the best cans, but I mean, let's be honest. Prior to you coming on the scene, they kind of were, right?
Yeah, I think that's still the concept is like no one knows about the RSP, no one knows about the RS9. And I think the world's about to be shocked to see what those other cans are rated at in comparison without giving out too much information.
Well, I agree. We've obviously tried to change that. I've spoken as highly as possible as I can, not because I want to try to help you sell cans, but because I truly believe you're making the best 9mm can right now. So
Right. Yeah, I think the biggest thing is people hear a can or they hear one or two cans and they think it's a great can, but they don't know what a great can is until they hear a great can. Right? Everybody's like, "Oh, my spread is the best." I'm like, "Well, what else have you shot?" And they're like, "Oh, well, this and my buddy's can." Well, then that's it. Like you don't know anything any different, or you don't know the data on it, or you don't know. There's a lot going into it.
yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I've never really understood the infatuation with the Wolfman. I mean, yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty good, but I mean, it's a really big can for what you're getting. It's what, $850.
Yeah.
Um, I don't really think you're getting anything, let's say, over Obsidian or Mod 9 in performance, really. It might look cooler on your subgun. That's probably true. Um, but yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think you're gonna shake the world. I've already looked at the RSP data, which I've on my end even, and it's extremely impressive. So, I would like to talk though real quick about the RS9. Where does the RS9 fall in regards to RSP in relation to suppression? I mean, is RSP quieter than RS9 or what? I mean, the RS9 obviously a bigger can for the people who don't know.
All right. So the RS9 is going to feature way better muzzle numbers than the RSP. The RSP is kind of the perfect 9 mil pistol can, right? So everything is designed around that action opening up multiple times right next to your face. So it's gonna, if you go to put it on a sub gun, it's gonna be louder out here because it's obviously gonna have more back pressure. But the RS9, designed with its big old blast chamber, is going to lower that back pressure down quite a bit. Same thing with our mount. A lot of people don't think about things, but it's like an entire system, right? It's not just one thing. Oh, like a lot of people in the Form 1 industry, you see it all the time, but like, oh, use shouldered radials for 9 mil, it's the best, or use this, yada, 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 yada. Some people, like the basic average Form 1er coming out of it, thinks that one baffle design does it all for this caliber, or one baffle design does it all for that caliber. You got to think of it as like a whole system. So the RS9 is more designed towards, that subgun realm. If you go and put an RSP on a subgun, yeah, you're still going to have crazy low numbers, but you're going to have higher numbers than an RS9, especially at the muzzle, being that it is a lot taller as well.
So for people who don't know, here's an RS9. I mean, it's got kind of that whole com block look going to it. It's a bigger can. RSP. That's going to be RSP. They're about the same size. And really, from what I can tell, inside, other than a materials standpoint, they're very, very similar cans. You've got a Mod 9. Mod 9 is going to be a lot longer, a little bit wider in diameter. So the fact you're beating a lot of these cans with less length is pretty cool, too. You know what I mean?
Right. So I guess the biggest thing to take away from the RSP and the RS9 is they're designed for their platform, right? They're not just hey, buy a 9 mil pistol can and it works okay on your subgun, or vice versa, right? You buy a subgun can, it works all right on your pistol. Like, these are purpose-driven suppressors. So Joe is the resilient chief design engineer. So yeah, these are all purpose-driven, purpose-tested.
That BC dough, I'm not sure what he means. I'm thinking he means just the size of the blast chamber. So from what I found, at least in my own stuff, when you switch, like let's say we go from, I don't know, a lot of our 1.5, 1.62, 5.0D rifle cans, right? We might be having incredibly low at ear numbers sometimes, but we'll see sort of a little bit higher muzzle numbers on occasion. And then we'll kind of look at the same design in a bigger tube, and instantly we bring that muzzle down, I think that volume, a lot of people think volume is like this super important aspect to everything. And I mean, it has importance, obviously, especially a minimum amount of it. But if you really want to bring muzzle numbers down, it's easy to throw volume at that problem.
Right. I think that's kind of like what the Wolfman does as a catch-all, right? So they'll just be like, oh, let's have mass volume with a bunch of radials. RS9 for 300 Blackout Supers. So it's not currently rated for it, but we will be testing how much it could take here soon. I know over at Sosco, they like to burn theirs up with the 8-inch 300 Blackout with Supers on the very first day they got it, and it didn't have any problems. Also, we mag dumped 20 rounds of 308 through one after firing our burn down through it of 9mm full auto. So I don't think it'll be a problem, but we're not officially rated for it until we do some burn down testing on it.
Which brings me to, let's talk a little bit about aluminum. Let's talk about, back to the RSP even again. We know RS9 can handle all the abuse you want to throw at it, all 17.4 stack, etc. But a lot of people might not understand just how much abuse do you think the RSP can take. Why don't you talk about that a little bit?
So a lot of the times you'll see like the Mod 9 or like the Erector 9. So the Mod 9, for example, has one stainless baffle, and the Erector 9 has two stainless baffles. Well, the RSP actually has three stainless baffles. And there's a lot of conflict between this, like, oh, 9mm you don't need stainless, or 9mm you need 2 or 1, or I don't ever hear anyone ever say 3. So when we were testing, we actually found it out with the RS9 when we were doing the 308 mag dump through it, that the third baffle is the one that takes the most heat and the most pressure applied. The way the baffle design is stacked, it's not all laterally pushing on one piece. It's actually two different sections that are having the force applied to it. So with the heat and the pressure forced on the third baffle, that is our I would say if you made that aluminum, it is not the best for that amount of pressure buildup as well as heat at the same time. So by adding that third stainless baffle, if we can get these apart, got dirty cans. But the third stainless
I'm literally having the same problem, right? I've been shooting the shit out of these, so they're not just going to drop out of the tube.
I have all dirty ones. But the third baffle is always the one that we've tested to be have the most. Yeah, that ain't coming out right now. But the most pressure and the most heat going to it, right? So the same thing after that is once you get that can up to like 800 degrees, I'm not saying 800 degrees, that's just a number here, but you get it up to that point where it's getting extremely hot. A lot of the times on aluminum, if you have that in the first or second or even the third position, you'll see a lot of that baffle erosion coming on prematurely in the can's life cycle. So, yeah, right where that seats on that second to third baffle, that's the point right there where do you want that top two stainless baffles pressing against that if it was aluminum, right? You wouldn't want that to concave in and like you see when a baffle collapses. So the whole concept there is transferring all that force to the rear baffles on the outside.
Which brings me to a question. Obviously we're kind of, sort of an Omega baffle, but not really, because an Omega baffle would have porting in it. It wouldn't have the notches or removed, portions here. So even though things look sort of similar, it doesn't make them the same thing. But I guess my question is, what made you come up with this configuration?
So if you look at the rear baffle stack, imagine that being a complete baffle stack without the first two, right? Like you just, or those first three, you replace those first three with those same baffles. That's pretty much where we were at, and we were at a standstill, right? Like we were beating people, but we weren't beating people by margins, right? So next came into play is what can we do? Can we make a mount that is drastically different? Can we make a mount that works well with those first two baffles? So it all went into once the can has enough pressure in it, what is it really doing, right? Is it just acting like a can with a bunch of radials in it, or what can we do once it gets past that first, second, third shot? What is it really doing? So is it all 17.4 or just the first three baffles? So the RS9 is all stainless baffles. On the RSP, it's the first three, and then the last six are 70-75, and then they're Type 3 hard-coated, as well as the tube and the end cap. And then the housing is nitrided, as well as the piston, and then the end cap standardized as well.
So we started off with more or less a normal baffle stack, correct?
Correct, yeah. We started with a normal baffle stack and modified a radial until we could get it as best as we could possibly get it with the configuration on the RS9 tube and body. And then from there, that's when we went into the fine tweaks, right? Like, obviously, we're tweaking. What's affecting it the most, right? And the way we address a can is we work from the front to the rear, the front being the part closest to the board, and then the rear being the end cap. So that's how we address it, because that's how the pressure is, entering the can, right? So if we change the end cap, we change the rear baffles, and we're not seeing much change, then we obviously know something's going on, or the front of the can is taking more into effect.
So we start off with a cone. We develop in a normal type of baffle stack. We develop that stack as far as possible we can get it. We want to go further. So next step was what? Did you go straight to coaxial in the first three? Did you do the piston and the mount stuff first? Or did you just do those both at the same time?
So working into it, we kind of knew what the mount system we planned on running was going to be based off of, testing from competitors' designs, this, that, and the other. And we knew that, we were going to have to use some way to move pressure other than just doing like a dual port brake or a single port brake, right? We wanted to do something a little different that's going to work with those first two baffles. So starting off, we made the mount and we had the baffles. Then we moved to the mount and we saw our change, right? We saw our change with our mount. We knew we were heading in the right direction. And then we were like, okay, what can we do more to these baffles? Because we got it really, really quiet, but at the same time, we were getting great muzzle numbers, but not great out of ear numbers, right? So at that point, and we didn't have a meter at this time. We were just shooting it, and it was all personal opinion. Like, that ear is becoming, it's very gassy. It's a very gassy can, and you're like, man, this can sucks. It's quiet, but it sucks to shoot. And you're like, man, I don't want that. So then we got into, well, how can I reduce back pressure while keeping this same, tone and quietness? Well, then I was like, well, we can't increase the blast chamber because we already made it like this, right? We can't just add on to this. We can shorten the tube. And I was like, well, we could do coax. And we had tried coax baffle designs, and we couldn't find one that we liked on 9mm that was as efficient as the rear radial. So then I was like, well, what if we extend the blast chamber down past the baffles? Not porting like a coax, but down past the baffles. So we pretty much attempted to get more blast chamber by porting along downside the baffles rather than making like a coax where it dumps into itself. We just wanted more until we could kill that back pressure. So we started with 1, moved to 2. All right, let's go to 3. Go to 3, all of a sudden we're getting too much oxygen in the can and it's not pressurizing enough. So I was like, okay, let's move it back. Moved it back, and that was the best position. It's all trial and error.
Yep, that's exactly what I was going to say. It all really highlights just how much trial and error can design truly is. You could build 2 cans, or you could build 10 cans, you could build 30 cans, and who knows where in that process you might hit on the best design. So someone was asking, what does the mount look like? So I'm going to go ahead and throw that up here. I'll make it the primary real quick. So this is the mount, guys, on the RS9. So your direct thread, you're more or less, if you want to check this out, the piston, but without the, without the whatever you want to call those. Like, I'm having a brain fart when I'm on camera. And that's going to bring your relationship with your first cone about right in there. So what's also interesting about this is if any of you guys are on the Patreon will remember, we did a bunch of blast chamber testing and piston testing, and the can that had the best performance was the one that had and it's funny too because everyone perceives the Obsidian and the Mod 9 to be the best, and those actually bury the tip in the piston. Well, we found our best one to be one with a slight gap, and to have a piston that was more than just your standard piston, and a lot of people really truly overlook that. So now I want to punt this question to Tyler because let's talk about the piston now and the magic and all that behind that.
So with the RSP, it was kind of like, well, we got the RS9 right where we want it. It's working great on the subgun. It was honestly like, let's put it in a pistol tube and see what it does, right? So I don't know if you remember the old ribbed shrimp, but the oval ribbed shrimp was the same size. So we put it in that bad boy, and we were using an Obsidian piston assembly. So we were shooting it, and we're like, man, it's there, but it's not all the way there, right? So then we got into the fact where it was like, okay, why are people doing it this way, right? Why are they doing the pistons like this? Why are they doing their boosters like this? And it honestly looks to us like they were overthinking it, right? Like they're either following suit where everybody has to have the same generic piston and everybody needs to have some kind of, cage per se. Like for instance, this silencer one. This just shows you how big the RS9 blast chamber is. That it can actually fit an entire silencer code booster inside of it. But everyone was doing this with a drill rather than an end mill, compared to like where the RSP is an end mill. But all these pistons are standardized across the industry. And we just started asking questions like, why are they doing it that way? Why is the piston that wide? Is it for the spring to ride on? Is it because it's seating on the back end cap? What exactly is it doing? So then we got into, well, that piston is so close to that cage. And why do they do that, right? So this piston seats pretty damn close to this cage on the inside. And that spring's right up against those ports on the piston. So we're like, well, what if we can alleviate the distance between the piston and the spring, right? Because then we would get more flow. Not only would we get more flow outwards, but it would also go travel backwards instead of where on this, it would actually hit the springs. So then we're like, okay, now we got the gas moving outwards. How are we going to direct it, right? Where are we going to move it to? So if you look at an Obsidian, I think you showed it on your Patreon last week, that they have nearly no porting on their booster. Well, their cage, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, it's
So
not,
the next thing was
it's not a ton.
right. It was like, what was the next thing we do? Do we allow a lot of porting? It's just trial and error, right? A lot of porting, little porting. What works good with the first baffle is the baffle spacing from the booster ring, too close, too far, this, that, and the other. So it became, it's just one of those things, right? You work through one thing, and then you work on the next thing, and then you work on the next thing, and you work on the next thing. So it isn't just, oh, I have a great baffle stack, or oh, I have a great piston, or oh, I have a great mount. My voice just cracked. But you work your way through it, right? So we started with the baffle stack that we already knew was tried and true, and then we worked around the problems we were having, which was the standardized silencer co Obsidian pattern piston and booster. And we said, how can we improve upon that? And I got to give it props because Bradley is the whole person behind the RSP booster and piston setup.
Hopefully people can see that. So on the left is a Mod 9. You've got this big old piston. It's up against the spring. And then you're tiny. You're floating in between. Very little going on there. And then your length is dramatically smaller as well. So you've really went back to the drawing board and did one of my favorite things, and that is the devil's in the details. Don't overlook little things in suppressors. I mean, I can't tell you how many people who do this for a living will tell you, at least in our little B team, that you can have a baffle stack, and if you don't get the clipping right, it can be a totally large difference between that stack versus a can with a different stack. And actually, you'd probably be perfect to talk about with that, because you use some Mondo clips on this thing, and that would probably be a good topic for next.
Yeah, so we're a big believer in shooting really clean cans and then looking at the deposits left in the can to see where and what that clip is doing. So I'm a big firm believer in large clips. I mean, when it comes to 30 cal and 9 mil, everyone thinks these are monster clips in these things. I hear that all the time. Every picture I post is, oh my God, those clips are huge. This, that, and the other. It's like, it bothers people, I guess. But I guess a lot of people are scared to clip big. A lot of times you see people clipping very small, or, being able to push that clip deeper or wider. And I think it's just a ratio, right? If you have it too skinny, too long, or if you have it too wide, too short, this, that, and the other, you just have to know. And it's hard for people that build their own cans because you can't just sit there and test all the time. But like being an SOT and stuff like that, you could sit there and take it apart and do the next one and see what that gas is doing with that clip. And it's not just going to be, on the same on every baffle stack, right? It's going to be, what is it doing in that? Like, for instance, this being a 1/4 inch and this being a 390 skirt length. This clip is going to perform differently between the two. But you're going to get the same effect if you have the same geometry on the front of the cone. It's just, is it porting that farther back? And you have to decide how far back in the can is that clip really being effective, right? If it's massive and it's in the rear of the can and the pressure's not there anymore, can you shorten that whole can up? If that baffle is not doing anything, if that clip is not doing anything, how short can you go? And we've been playing with the RSP here lately a lot, and we've come to the point where we're honestly surprising ourselves, like moving backwards and looking at like playing around with an RSPK, where it literally, I think it has like 5 baffles, and it's like 5 inches long. And after first round's obviously going to have more first round pop because it's, super short. But moving to like the second and third shot, we're just like shocked. We're just like crazy surprised on how effective a can can be. Like, if you start taking baffles out, it's really like, how short can you go and not lose sound suppression?
Yeah, no. I'm guilty of it as well. You know, and I know you are too because you started in the same place as I started. We started with clipping charts and what we've learned on forums and just what we've always done, and then, um, you know, it's taken time, and now even myself, you know, I've learned a lot more about clipping, and I've found just that clipping is second to the baffles geometry and spacing. I mean, clipping is probably the most important part after that. And then getting the clipping right, though, is the biggest thing. I mean, so my clipping as well, I've been going, you know, deeper and a little bit wider and getting very, you know, and I want to caution people, though, because it all has to do with the baffle as well. Every baffle is different. That's probably the other thing, is we all are so used to our charts, right? Our charts, and there's just not a one size fits all for a caliber or even a style of. You can't say 60 cones on a 308 should be at such and such. It's a starting place for sure, but yeah, I mean there's nothing can replace developing cans, which makes me want to answer someone's question from earlier, and that was on the topic of trial and error. Joe, how many stamps do you think you wasted messing up new designs since it's $200 and approval wait for each and recores are illegal? Well, I don't think any stamp is ever wasted because you always learn something from every can you make. Second off, recores aren't illegal. I think you just don't know what a recore truly is. When someone says a recore, that means literally sending it off to someone who can legally record it. You know, I guess technically a recore would still be you doing it as well, but it would just then be a legal recore in that particular nature. So from the day I started out with the Patreon and all of that, I sought out and made friends with people who could help me with a lot of this stuff. And without our friends, what are we in this world? You know, and so I've been very blessed to have people in the background who have been willing to step up and help. Sometimes, you know, it would still have cost money, but maybe not as much as it would. So, you know, a lot of people, at least in the background, have believed in what we've been doing for a long time and has made it where we can send cans out. And there'll be times where I have 4, 5, 6 cans in this revolving circle of in and out, in and out, in and out with SOTs to the point where, you know, I don't even know how many some of my tubes have been recorded, but all of them have been done in that manner where I've been sending them to an FFL, having the changes made, and all of that. So, and then for those who don't know, you basically you're not allowed to replace parts unless an FFL is doing it. So, and that's just the nature of the game, unfortunately, with suppressors. So, it makes it hard to do what we do from a public nature, and sometimes people will get upset over how long it might be till we get to test a certain can, or someone would say try this, try that, and to do this all legally, which has been the purpose and what I've always tried to strive to the best of my abilities, has required a lot of time, a lot of money, and stuff. So and to selectively choose what we do. So we only have so much resources, I guess is what I'm trying to say, and we got to try to use them as wisely as possible. So I wouldn't say anything's been wasted at all. We've definitely learned, I think, something from literally every single can we've ever done. And I bet you Tyler feels the same way about every can he's tested to get to where he's at. I mean, you learn something every single time.
Yep, I'd say so. We're working on some behind the scenes stuff, and we have one that's working really, 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 really great at your numbers, but we haven't played around with trying to get that muzzle number now, because obviously, as you can tell from RSP data, we're all about the shooter, right? That's our biggest thing. We're not crazy about muzzle, but at the same time, we're now at the point on 30 cal stuff where we don't want to have that trade-off where we're going to have a crazy quiet out of your can, but then our muzzle is just failing per se, right? Like it's dramatically different. So our 30 cal can, we're looking to level it out, and that's the same thing, right? So we started testing with variations, and you'll change something ever so slightly and you throw the whole can off, right? you're like, man, this thing is almost identical to the previous one, but you changed one fine thing, and now here we are, crazy muzzle difference or crazy out of ear difference. And I'm not saying in a good way, I'm saying in a bad way, right? So you think your can's perfect, and then you got to make a little tweak, and you're like, that is drastically wrong. Something you thought would help, or you just wanted to try out, and you're like, okay, now I know in the future to stay away from that because now it has become an issue.
So I hate to do this, but I want to address something real quick. Eric, I'm not sure if I pissed in your Cheerios or something at some point in my life, but I'm not sure what the deal is. But
Fucking Cheerios suck.
yeah, right. I'm pretty sure I've pretty much stressed for quite some time now, again, that the charts are a starting point. And if you go look at every can we've made in probably the last, I don't know, at least 8 months, if not a year, they've all got 250 or plus deep clips. Very similar to this. A lot of the cans we've been developing have had very large clips. So I don't know, man. I guess I apologize if I did something to upset you, but I've noticed the last few live streams you're very negative, and I guess this is my formal public apology, man. Don't know what I can do, but anyway, let's get back to actual content, and here we go. Here, will there ever be 13.5 by 1 left-hand pistons and or their respective direct thread caps available for RS9?
Yeah, I know I've been failing Tech Junkie on this one. So we made 13.5 by 1 pistons for the Pew Science testing. We made like a limited number because he doesn't have a half by 28 barrel or anything to test with. So we made like a batch of 5, and I sent Tech Junkie one, because he asked if we had one available, and I didn't want him to be without. But they were threaded like through bore, not stopped on they're not face mounted per se. So moving on, Jay brought this up as well, is that, we need to have a face mounted 13 by 1 left hand because that's how 13 by 1 left hand is. It doesn't go off of the shoulder, it goes off the face of the barrel. So currently we've had the issue with keeping up with production and not being able to prototype or not being able to, make those other accessories, male 13.5 by 1 and shit like that. So good news is today we just moved over all of our commercial sales to a company. A company is going to handle all of our commercial sales. So this is news probably to Joe. He didn't know about this, but a company is taking over all of our...
I knew you were working on some big deal, but I didn't know what it was going to be.
So a company is taking over all of our commercial sales, as well as like 50% marketing. I can't say much on it or what it is and all that, but the point being is now we can focus on production. Now we can focus on bringing those accessories up. Now we can focus on manufacturing, right? I don't have to sit here and worry, is this dealer going to get his can, or is this dealer email? Do I got to answer the phone? Got to do this or that and the other? And that gives us the opportunity now to where we can do mass volume. So being able to do mass volume, now we can get more machines. We can provide those cans, and now we can ramp up for Q Science review, Joe's review, YouTube reviews dropping out, because Brazilian's about to pop up on the map. And I don't know if you know how small our company is, but we have 2 employees, me and my partner Bradley, and we only have 1 machine currently. So currently we're trying to keep up production. We've been trying to get to prototypes, to get to testing, to get to those accessories. So we're now to the point where now that we can take that weight off our shoulders, we can now get to those things. So I imagine the 13.5 by 1 probably in a month or 2, I'd say. As soon as these RSPs start taking off, I know everybody in the world's going to want a 13.5 by 1 piston. So that's going to be our first accessory to make.
So 2 things. I'm gonna ask this because I know Andrew's gonna want me to have asked this, and I know in the last live stream with Otter Creek Labs this came up, so I'm gonna go ahead and get it out of the way. So there were people concerned with Otter Creek Labs, for example, who were worried about, what's the time horizon? Is the company going to go under? Are they going to be here to warranty my can in such and such time and all of that? So just if you want to go ahead and address that, we can get that one out of here.
right? So I think the biggest thing, right, is if you look at Andrew and you look at us. I mean, Andrew can be a dickhead anywhere he wants to be, right? But at the end of the day, Andrew's going to take care of you, and that's the same thing with us, right? We've shown that in our past company. We've shown that here. I don't know anyone that's been like, oh, I've had a messed up product and I've never taken care of it, right? I know you've known, and I know a lot of people in the background don't know, but there's a lot of things that happened, like astronomical things with like crazy amounts of money that like completely shut us down, that we had to refund thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars. And you would think that, hey, I just paid this guy lots and lots of money. He has crazy amount of orders. Now he has to refund them all. And he's already ordered all this material, right? Well, we worked for the first 3 months of Resilient, making every product we had to pay back products from Shrimp Gang. I don't know if anybody actually knows that. So our first 3 months of production, every RS9 that went out the door went straight back to every single customer from a company that closed down, right? So we're always worried about companies closing down. Well, even with that company closing down, we worked for 3 months to make sure those people, were happy, to make sure those people were fulfilled. So in the same boat, I think anyone can say that, I've always taken care of them, or I always will. I don't think they have a doubt in their mind that Resilient will be there to take care of them. And if there is, that doubt that, oh, this company might go under, or this, that, and the other, is you're not taking that risk, right? You can buy a subpar product and you're just killing innovation at this point because you're believing in marketing or suggestions, and you're not going off of real things.
Well, I think you're going to be around for quite some time. I think everyone on the B team basically is. If people aren't familiar with the B team, that's going to be Resilient, that's going to be your Reardon, that's going to be your Otter Creek Labs, your Diligent Defense, your Liberty Precision. Basically, anyone who cut their teeth, in the Form 1 world, who most of us have been, thought that we wouldn't be able to succeed in the big can world, and I think we are all in some way shocking people as a whole, and it's been a lot of fun. But we are getting into a point now where, everyone is trying to expand as fast as possible, and I know you're trying to get some new equipment involved, so you can do that. So why don't you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so November, I don't know if anybody knows, but from May till November, Shrimp Gang opened up in May. November, November, we purchased CNC machine, and that's when we started moving everything in-house that we could possibly manage, right? So we did all that, and then we got our SOT, we got our FFL, and we've gotten to the point where we couldn't keep up with Shrimp Gang, and we couldn't keep up with, Resilient started, right? And then now we're to the point where we can't keep up with the Resilient. But the point is, right, how do you grow a dealer base when you have these multi-million-dollar companies, right? You walk in somewhere, they're going to say, why would I sell yours if I can sell 15 different SKUs from this other dealer, right? So then you get these 50 dealers or 60 dealers, your little tight-knit group of dealers. And the way that works is one dealer might order 1 can a month, or the other dealer might order 10, 15, 20, 30, and he loves them, right? They're going crazy. So that's the point where we're at now, is now we're at that point where we can't keep up. As soon as I got cans coming back from coating, I'm sitting here trying to send other cans off to coating. And what's going to happen now? We have YouTube reviews dropping, your reviews dropping. We have other YouTube reviews. We have Q Science dropping. And we're at the point now where we're not going to be able to keep up with demand. So this whole deal we've been working on in the background is going to alleviate most of that weight off of our shoulders. So now where we can focus on that demand, right? We can get more machines. We have the shop space. We have a 2,000 square foot shop with like a 250 square foot office, but we have one machine. So we have open floor, and we have the will and the, I would say, the pride to crank out those cans as fast and as high as quality as we can. So that's the biggest thing now, is expanding. And that big deal today, really, like I said, now we can focus on those things, creating good cans and getting those cans out to customers.
I'm just going to answer this real quick so we get out of the way and continue. Like I just said, it's the B team, it's Diligent, Reardon, Liberty, Otter Creek Labs, Resilient, obviously, since you're right here. Mike, Dino Precision. I think that pretty much covers everyone. We always seem to forget one, but for those who don't know, I'll go ahead and give you guys a little bit of a background. We all started off as separate people who we didn't know anyone, okay? And there was a point where I tried to bring everyone together, and over time, we group chat, we do a bunch of things, and we all have also become friends. So what do? I mean, while they're all separate entities, absolutely everyone's designing their own stuff. We also share designs with each other, and we try to help each other, and it's really empowered us. So instead of being just a small little, you're just you trying to figure stuff out in the world, it's all of us trying to just make stuff the best we can make, and we have fun, we talk shit to each other, but at the end of the day, everyone is friends, and we're all just trying to make the best products possible. Where do I come into that? Well, obviously, I've always reviewed stuff. I've always tried to learn stuff as much as possible, and then therefore that means I've tried to help people when any of these guys have a question about something. I give them advice. And then, for those who don't know, recently Diligent Defense, said, hey, would you like to come on board and help us, design and test cans? And I said, yeah, that would be great, because it also then helps out the Patreon, because now we get access to certain things we just literally wouldn't be able to afford to be able to do. It's definitely been a challenge to try to, because everyone shares the design, to not compete, but compete at the same time. So it has been a little bit of a juggle for sure. But at the end of the day, my biggest deal was also that if I wasn't willing to do any of this unless I could keep my anonymity for the most part, as well as no one expects for me to recommend a can just because I've helped them work on it or whatever. My deal is I literally only recommend cans that I have data on, and I only recommend cans for the specific application I truly believe are, whether the best or whatnot. And you'll see a lot of times when I do recommend cans, I will always try to recommend 3 to 4 in any situation. A lot of times it'll be someone's from the B team, because I see the data every day. I know exactly what's in these cans. I know exactly what they do. But then I also try to add some competitors who I've seen data on as well, who I believe are in the same or close to it tiers. I don't want to ever be a car salesman or a can salesman for that matter, but that is, people come and ask recommendations. So I just want to basically clear that up. But Jack, I know your question's been a little old, so I'm going to throw it here, and maybe we can pivot away from 9mm. But Tyler, plans on rifle cans?
So I know we missed it a little bit back. Also, I think there's a question on this ugly thing right here. But speaking of rifle cans first, yeah, I'd say we're working on something in the works. I'm not trying to sound cocky or confident or anything, but obviously if we're going to come out with something, we want to be way ahead of the rest, just like we did with the RSP and the RS9. So it's hard to say words on it, but it's going to be pretty damn shocking when it comes out. But secret stuff, yes, rifle stuff is coming. I would say an L can is going to be the first thing you would see, and then L-can or putt butt. I don't know which one we're going to release next, but those are the 2 things in the works. Moving to the putt butt. Everything we really do is really, really, really based off of increased pressure-driven products, right? So if you ever seen, no one's ever seen this disassembled before, or how it disassembles. But this is actually 2 3/8 inch diameter. So if you're used to an 1.5 inch can that has ASR Bravo 1 3/8 by 24, that's a old white trash 24mm mount in there. So it's actually massive can. So this is, like I said, it's 2 3/8 stock that's turned down. So it's 2.36. This is 17.4. You can take whatever mount you want to put on it, QD. Hasn't been done on any AK cam to date. This is a grade 9. Oh, this one's grade 5, but they're going to be grade 9 titanium tubes. This one's titanium, grade 5. 17.4 end cap. And the way this works is, you're going to be like, what? This is the weirdest looking thing, because I heard you say it on your last live. But this has female threads inside of it. And this has male threads. And if I can get this off my hand, I don't think I'll be able to. But I came prepared because, you know, Andrew fucks up welding shit and fucks some up. So this one's sunk in a little bit. But this is what it looks like with the tube off. So we obviously have blast chamber porting, and then the tube cups down in here and tightens on that radius of the tube and radius down in that corner. So just for prototype reasons, we try to do it without O-rings, high temp O-rings. We're trying to get to the point now where how can we get that tube to seal here? How can we get that tube to seal on the end cap? Because it seats down in that end cap as well. So we can get this, what you would call a triaxial chamber, to seal on both ends while maintaining this clone correct AK100 series alpha style suppressor, which the name Putnik, a lot of people, Alex, if he's in here, is going to be like, I named it that. But the actual nickname for the Zenitco suppressor is actually Sputnik or Putnik on the slang terms for it. So it's an actual Russian clone suppressor for an AK100 series. I know KUSA just released their 104s. They've had their 103s out. PSA has their 103s, their 104s, I think, and their 102s dropped today. So there's going to be a huge market for these because everybody's making 100 series suppressor or AKs now, and that's perfectly what these for. And if you don't know what an AK 100 series gun is, it's a shortened AK style rifle. It's a gas block front sight post combo where the threads are either on the gas block or they're right there at the barrel. So that way it's a very short 12.5 inch, 10.5 inch gun rather than a 16 inch gun. And these are, like I said, this is Triax. It's kind of like a Triax hybrid. It has the outer chambers that only vent from the blast chamber.
They might not know what triax means, by the way.
Right. So you have coax, which typically you see on like a flow style baffle. You have holes around it, or you have porting of some sort, right? And you can port inwards to the inner chamber, or you can port outwards. There's lots and lots of different ways to do it. But this being, it has 3 chambers. This outer larger chamber is the biggest chamber it has, right? But the crazy thing is about what we've learned with working with something this large in diameter is it takes a crap ton of pressure to get this thing to work. So if you're sitting here and you're like, oh, I want to shoot 300 blackout subs on this 5.8 inch can, it's loud. It's the loudest 300 blackout sub can I've ever heard in my entire life, probably. But then you go and you put, let's say, on like a SBR or something that's like stupid, like a Draco or like a 10.5 inch AK, and specifically piston guns, because this thing is born for piston guns. We put it on a PWS just to like try it out, and we put it on like a PSA 10.5 inch upper, like, you know, gas impingement, and noticeable difference. This thing whoops ass on piston guns. I don't know what it is. I mean, I do, but I don't, right? So it is specifically designed for short barreled rifles and piston driven guns. You go and put it on a gas AR, you know, it's not designed for that. Like I said, even with the RSP and the RS9, everything we designed is designed around a gun, around a platform. I'm not going to give you a can that sounds good on this or that, and this or that. I want you to have a can that sounds amazing on exactly what it was designed for. So that's the biggest thing too, is people are like, in the Form 1 world, you could build you a can that's perfectly for your setup, for your design. But then you go in the Form 4 world, you're like, I'm just going to pick from my choices. Well, this one has the best head here. This one has the best muzzle. But what are you putting it on? What mount are you using? What's the barrel length? What style of action is it? It all comes into play. So this is designed specifically for piston-driven guns. And like I said, it also transfers over to a PWS and an AR platform rather than just an AK. But to go into terms on how prototyping is going and everything like that, these performed way, way better than we ever expected them to. We tried the Hyperion, we tried the Enticer, we tried the Hydrogen, all on AKs. And you're thinking these are, you know, great performing cans. You put it on an AK and they're just all trash. All trash. Doesn't matter what can you try. Sandman, they're all trash. We tested a Wolverine, we DB'd 144 at ear on Wolverine. Same ammo, Golden Tiger. It's like military grade, 7.62 by 39. And then That was on a 10.5-inch WVP Fox with this same exact mount. And then we went and tried our Putnik, and at ear, we're getting 137, which all of y'all are like 144, 137. That's not that great, but that's out of a 10.5-inch piston-driven AK, and AKs leak, and you have all sorts of different factors going on than you would with a gas gun. But to show the difference here, when we're shooting with a Hyperion or a Hydrogen or an Enticer on the 7.62, same exact gun, at ear, we're getting somewhere right around 147, 148 decibels. So everyone's saying that the Wolverine sucks. Any can is going to suck on an AK unless it's specifically designed for it. Like I said, going from a 147 from the top cans on the market to you slap a Wolverine on it, and you're like, man, a Wolverine sucks on everything. And then I've always said that myself too. I've always heard people say the Wolverine sucks. And I'm like, well, let me shoot it. I shoot it on an AR or anything else, and I'm like, this thing's dog shit. Well, then I go and put it on the AK, and I'm like, this is way better than the other cans. So then we designed the Putnik. I was like, man, don't be a flop. Don't be a flop. And it shocked us completely. I've never had a can that designed the very first time that just blew me away. For only being 5.8 inches and putting it on a 10.5-inch 7.62 by 39, which is a damn fireball blaster, this thing's badass. But like I said, it doesn't correlate to a gas gun. You put it on, or I can't say gas gun, gas impingement gun versus a piston gun. But it reflectively shows not only is it gun type like AK to PWS, it works regardless of piston type.
Well, you know, I can't talk too much about what me and Dale and Darren have been working on, but it's been amazing to see just how much there's always been this. Oh, a dB doesn't matter. 3 dB is the starting place of what you can hear, and all of these sorts of things. And it can be sort of true depending on where in the scale you're at. But you know, we've been working on a lot of you know, exposure type stuff with inner-ear modeling, let's say, and it's been amazing to see what even a quarter to a half of a dB on a single shot can sometimes do to the, you know, full amount of shots you can be exposed to in a 24-hour period of time. So it's been interesting to see that isn't always the case. You can't just blanket take it, especially when you start to get into the lower, you know, the lower stuff, you know, when you get under those 140s and things of that nature. Up in the 140s, it gets a little bit crazy. I mean, you can have some huge swings on what you're really truly being exposed to. And then a lot of people, you know, they confuse what we're talking about too. I mean, there's two different things. There's, you know, what it sounds like to you, and then there's what kind of hearing damage you're being exposed to. These two things might sound the same, but be drastically different. You know, in a 24-hour period of time, you know, at a certain level, you might be able to be exposed to, let's say, I don't know, 200 shots at that level. But then make a fairly small change, and you might only be 50 shots at that level, you know. So it's cool. I know there's a lot of talk too about how peak dB sometimes doesn't always correlate, but that's not 100% true either, unfortunately. But we're working on that, obviously. You know about that. But it's really cool to see you coming up with a can that can solve some of these things for people. I'm not a big comm block guy, obviously. You are. And there's clearly a big market for this kind of stuff. And clearly it sounds like a need for more cans that can do well on the AK style platforms and those other platforms that are, you know, like you said, piston driven and things of that nature. So kudos to you. Obviously, people forget that it takes pressure for the features in suppressors to work.
Right.
And you found that out yourself as well. And then I think the last thing I would say is that, you know, it's kind of similar to Nomad. For example, when you were talking about 300 Blackout, I found Nomad to not work nearly as well on 300 Blackout subs as it does on 308. On 308, when you've got all that gas volume and all of that pressure, it works great. It
Right.
gives you great numbers. You go and throw it on 300 blackout. It's not bad by any means. Like, don't get me confused. It's still a good can. People are still gonna go home and be very, very happy with it. But it just internal designs do matter, and some designs take pressure and they take gas volume or both.
Right. I can't speak too much on it, but the RS9 is a big contributor to that. When you're going to see it on short barreled rifles, like I spoke to you about it before, that it's going to be a complete flop in comparison to other cans when it comes to short barreled rifles, or in 9mm, of course, like short barrel PCCs. When the data comes out, and you might see it in your testing as well, if you have, I don't know what you have testing wise, if you can test, like if you have something that's similar, action wise, and like let's say like an MP5 versus an MP5 PDW, right? Same style platform, same style everything. The only thing you're changing is barrel length. You're going to see a drastic change because obviously you're having way higher pressure on that short barrel. So it seems to me like we're getting into that realm where we're really good at addressing short barrel rifles. Really, really good. And we haven't played or dove into 5.56 at all, but we've made like one. Well, I should say this. We haven't dove into 5.56 cans specifically, but we have tested 30 cal cans on 5.56 that performed extremely well, shockingly. You know what I'm saying? Where you like, it sounds decent on 308, and then you go put it on a 5.56, and you're like, holy shit, this is what I should have designed this for in the first place. I think I told you that in the very beginning when we started working on 30 cal cans. I was like, man, I'm designing 30 cal cans, and I'm being badass 5.56 cans. I was like, damn it. Well, now we're flipped, right? I'm not saying it's bad on 5.56 or anything like that, but we've just now gotten to the point where we have great 308 prototypes and we still have those original 5.56 cans, and I'm like, we need to leave that some bitch right there and come back to it one day, right? It's just what's next in the lineup. So
Yeah, it's interesting because unfortunately most of the 4 community makes their 5.56 cans as just 5.56 board 30 cal cans, and that's why they tend to be flops.
Yep.
But you can make a 30 cal can for 5.56 sound great as well. You just have to do it the right way. So it's interesting. If you really put the time in and stuff. 5.56 obviously, I find it to be very similar to what you kind of find with shorter barrel 7.62 by 39. It's just a very hard, a hard gremlin to suppress. It really takes different features than a lot of other cans. Obviously, you can make it work for sure. People do, no doubt. But it really reinforces that you should have dedicated cans for kind of certain categories of suppressors. But then you also can't go, okay, well, I need a dedicated 5.56 can, so I need to go find something off the market that says it's a dedicated 5.56 can, because that doesn't necessarily make it any good at all, unfortunately.
Right. I think going back to the Budnick, I saw someone was commenting about it, is the reason this took so long is because it is so insanely expensive to prototype this diameter of material. Especially like when you're mass producing stuff, right? You can buy stuff in bulk, you get a better discount, everything like that. And this thing and someone also asked the weight of the prototype. Well, obviously it doesn't have the portholes that go all the way around on a typical Putnik. I don't know if anybody ever knew that, but it's supposed to have portholes that go all the way around. But that goes back to our sealing thing, right? As you can see, right, I don't know if you'll be able to pick it up on camera. There's a little bit of seal leakage right here. So this is when we fired it on, I believe, 300 Win Mag, 270. Yes, we fired these on bolt actions. It looked ridiculous, but we did. But this little bit, oh God, camera's fucking backwards. Anyways, it's leaking on the edges down here, right? So there's anything with prototyping is you're going to have to live and learn and figure out what it's doing. So the way these took forever and why there was such a delay is because, one, we don't have a machine big enough to make these, number one. And number two is, like I said, finding a piece of titanium tube in a size that's perfectly made for this was impossible. We had to order I found a dude on eBay that literally had a stub of 2 3/8 solid bar stock titanium, and it was ridiculously priced. And it was only 11 inches. And we actually bored that solid bar stock titanium down and made this tube. We made 2 of them. So we only have 2 prototype Putniks. But crazy amount of money. Like each one of these cans is probably $1,100 in material alone. Like it's ridiculous. And like I said, the only way this would be why it didn't come faster is because it's custom. It's going to be all custom material for this. It's going to be mill run titanium for this. And everybody's like, well, why? What's taking so long? What's the update? It's so hard to get done when it comes to stuff that's so crazy expensive. Yes, in a production sense, it makes sense when you can order mass volume, but as it currently sits, that's a very, very expensive prototype.
Yeah, most people don't realize just how much the decision-making process in can development is about, what materials can you get, how easily can you mass produce it, because at the end of the day, we've got to be able to make thousands of these. And that's literally the hardest part of a lot of this, is being able to scale up. You can't have 10 different cones at 10 different skirt sizes and be making, and unless you get into some crazy numbers where you can order 10,000 of each baffle, skirt, then that's a little bit different of a story. But it gets a little nuts. But this does highlight something you said earlier that I want to mention, and that was, you said, how you sent it out to Andrew at Otter Creek Labs to be welded. And that goes to tell you guys too, like, that's part of the beauty of our little group, is instead of just having one company and one set of resources, everyone in our little group, we can share resources, and that then gets brought to you guys. You guys benefit from a lot of that. So, but I do want to move on here, if we can, and that is to question, since we were talking about 5.56. On my Form 1 suppressor, on my 7.5 inch 5.56, which by the way, 7.5 inch and 5.56, we're talking a lot of pressure, a lot of unburnt powder. So a lot of it is going to be igniting inside the can when it gets in that oxygenated environment. It really tames it, but it is still loud, but a lot tamer than without. I put the exact same can on a Ruger 1022 takedown, and it was just as loud as my 5.56. It's 9 radial cups. So I'm going to hit it. I'm going to take a stab at this, Tyler, and then I'm going to let you. So basically, like we were talking about before, the features on your baffles, volume, and all of these things, they have an effect. So you have to have pressure a lot of times for the features on cones to work. A lot of people are naturally inclined to go to this bigger diameter can on certain applications where it's actually more than likely going to hurt them unless they're using that diameter in a way that benefits them. Are you going to a coaxial or in your case with Putnik, 3 axes, right? So while you might have this big tube, you're inside, you aren't nearly as voluminous as it might imply. So for me, at least, to answer this question, I would say that's part of it, is you've got probably almost certainly, since it's a 5.56 can, a lot of volume. You've probably got much larger clips, and you're just not going to be getting the same kind of flow inside of that suppressor as you would when you're shooting it on 5.56. And you're also shooting radials on 5.56. On the other hand, you said you're happy with those results. That's great, but we tend to not find radials be very beneficial on things of that nature until you have gotten the gas down into a subsonic velocity. So typically in the second half of the can. And now I'm going to pivot to Tyler and let him add to anything I just said.
So saying that it has 9 radial cups is probably a large can lengthwise. And my biggest thing with this is, this goes back to, well, there's a lot of details missing, obviously, but going back to what is a great can and what's a good can, right? So you seem to be very happy with it, which is great. But at the same time, you have to look at it as, is this can really doing the best of its ability that it can do? Or is it good enough for me, right? And a lot of people are happy with it's good enough for me, it's good for my application, especially in the Form 1 world. This is great. It does exactly what I want it to do. But at the same time, is if you built that can to be the best that it could be, or dug more into it and this, that, and the other, you'd be able to make that, I always say, make that pressure work for us, right? If we can make the pressure work for us in the way we want it to work, we can have that can do exactly what we want it to do, right? You're using the features, you're directing the pressure with your features. So in that, you're pretty much, you have to look at it as, this goes back to just slapping baffles in the tube, right? Oh, this works for this or this works for that. And like he was saying that we don't typically use radials in a 5.56 can. And it's almost gotten to the point now where I pushed it away in the 308 sense, is I pushed away a radial edge, a radial shoulder, a radial anything, is because now I'm seeing it get further and further away in my testing. And it comes down to, with that 22, is I have a Form 1, like an OG DM 22 can that's all radials, right? And that does not do good in comparison to, say, the Dead Air Mask that I have. Totally different style, similar to like a K-Cup style. But my point being is, you can have a can that does good for what you want it to do. You might think it's a great can at that, but until you compare it against other things, then it's not going to be. You know what I'm getting at, Joseph? Here is that it's on a 7.5 inch. It's practically saying that you're taming it, but you're not getting the full experience of shooting suppress, in my opinion. So when you go to put it on a 22, it seems like it's a very long can, and it seems like it's probably 1.5 inch and 3/8 cups, 1.355 D cell. And it sounds to me like it's just all falling off because your pressure isn't working for you. In my sense, that's what I'm trying to get at. Is you're not having the can work for you with your geometry setup on 22, let alone 5.56. It's taming it, like you're saying.
I'm just kind of going through here, and people are saying thank you for things. So I'm trying to let them get a little exposure on their comments. But so far, it looks like we've answered everyone sufficiently. Here's one for you though. Any plans on Inconel Stellite beyond 17.4? I'm pretty sure Andrew showed just how unimportant some of those can be if you design the can right. But go ahead, and I'll let you answer it.
Right. I think we've been going back and forth with Andrew on this as well, and we think that geometry plays a big factor in baffle erosion and baffle wear. So when you get into like Inconel and Stellite, I think we've seen it with like the new CR5, right? You can have Stellite, but if you have failed geometry or failed manufacturing, then it's not going to matter what material you use. If your geometry isn't there to uphold that baffle design. It goes back to like with the RS9 and RSP with that third baffle being stainless. It happened from a sense of destructive testing. We learned where it was going to fail, right? So same thing when you're using materials, right? Can I get away with 17.4? And you don't say get away in a bad sense. It's more, that goes to the end user, right? Now the can is less expensive. Now I can make more of them faster. Everyone's happy. The can's lighter. The can does just as well, right? You see the polonium with the reverse blast baffle. That's nothing new. That's old tech, and I'm pretty sure Andrew said that publicly as well. It goes back to how smart can I get with my material? How can I place this geometry to get the most life out of this, right? So us here currently, we have no plans for a duty can currently. If we get into the 5.56 realm, in like the next year, like it would have to be like a year out, we may do like something like a YHM style where they use like an Inconel pressed in. They use a diffuser, but we would probably use something slightly different in our own kind of style, I would say, because we do stuff a little more different when it comes to rifle things than say, like I know Joseph always says like the B team bounces ideas off each other, but I can honestly say I don't necessarily agree with the ideas from others or this, that, and the other. So it's not the sense that we're all designing practically the same cans or have the same ideas or bouncing back and forth. We're all very secretive when it comes to the fine, minute things we've found. But from a general sense,
that's true. That's true.
When it comes to a general sense of this material works good or this geometry works good for baffle erosion, right? That's helping everyone out in the team, right? When it comes to, oh, this wall thickness is too thin, this wall thickness is too thick, or you could do this, or hey, you should turn it down on the outside rather than boring it out on the inside. Like the little things like that is what we go back and forth with. But we're obviously not, if we find something that's near and dear to us that's working greatly, we're obviously not going to spit it out to the team. I would say that everyone has found that niche going through their rifles. Like obviously the Polonium has its place, obviously the Enticer has its place, obviously the RSP and RS9 have their place. So we've all hit in that point where we've worked really hard on these cans, and they're now. No, we didn't know that was going to be the case, right? You're going to say, "Hey, I have a great can coming out," and the DDC launches a great can, and then you have Otter that's like, "Oh, we're going to have 5x6 can. That's great." It's not like, "Hey, this is exactly what I did, and this is how I made the can." It goes back to, "Hey, that's great that you got something working good," and then we see it publicly, and we're like, "Holy shit, dude, that's badass."
Andrew's probably the most transparent, I think, out of all of us. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah, Andrew posted it, and he was like, "I'm gonna try this," and I was like, "That literally makes me cringe. Don't fucking do that." We just have totally different ideas when it comes to designs, but like I said, we're all in the same area, but we don't agree all on all things when it comes to designs.
I know. Sometimes I feel bad. Andrew comes up with some very interesting designs, and he'll be like, "Hey, bro, what do you think of this?" And I'll be like, "I fucking hate it." And I feel like I'm constantly fucking, and you just hit something and you disconnected yourself. Okay. Well, now I'm by myself. This is odd. Well, I'm not sure what happened. I think he might have hit something or something because it just disconnected him. It says devices not connected on his end. Here, I'll have to send him a new link or something. I bet you he'll figure it out here in a second. Rejoin, retard. You disconnected yourself. Well, we can only do so much on our end, right? We'll give him a second. If not, I can answer questions. We'll see how long it takes him. I bet you his computer died. He was very nervous about doing this live stream. He even went out and bought his first webcam. Oh, there he is. All right, hold on. All right, you're back. What happened?
Oh, now my speakers don't work.
Man, you fucked up this live stream twice now. God damn it.
I literally kicked my cord and I unplugged the mic, the speakers, and fucking everything. So I just need to stay away from the desk.
Yeah, sit back farther or something. You can even bring your camera down. We've been looking at the top of your head about the middle of the screen this whole time. So
ain't nobody getting a full frontal unless they're paying for it.
By the way, everyone, we're all going to SHOT Show, if you guys didn't know that. So if any of you guys are going to SHOT Show, we'll see you there. Tyler's going, Liberty's going, Reardon's going, Andrew's going, DDC, myself, we're all going. So hopefully we can see you guys at SHOT Show. But getting back to... I mean, there's a bunch of people basically praising you, for a lot of things you've done, how you've taken care of people. So that's great that you've stood out, blah, 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 blah. But Suppress Nation, Chris at Suppress Nation says, what's the weight on the can? Now, I don't know how long ago. So he might be talking about Putnik, I think. But you might as well just give the weights on all three of your current cans.
RSP is 8 ounces, RS9, 12 point, can't remember off the top of my head, 12.4 with the mount. The Putnik prototype, this thing's fucking massive. And it's stainless, welded 1 3/4 and 2 3/8, and titanium on the outside. Anyways, the Wolverine's 24 ounces. This is 20 ounces currently in its current state. So it's a big boy. It's 2 ounces heavier than a same NS. Lengthwise. Oh, fucking it up. But, yep, it is 2 ounces heavier. But Again, this is the first prototype. It doesn't have any of the portholes. I can take some weight out of it, a lot of weight out of it, because they're 1/4-inch holes, and there's like fucking 13 of them going all the way around this thing. So I'm hoping to have it around 18 to 20 once it's all said and done, ready to go, production model. As long as we can beat the competition out, which would obviously be the Wolverine.
Well,
Sounds pressure.
I mean, I don't think you're gonna have any problems with beating the Wolverine. But at the end of the day, you're also quite a bit bigger than the Wolverine. We got to give the Wolverine some credit here. You know, I mean, you're pretty friggin' wide, for example.
Yeah, it's a big girl.
But you're filling a niche that no one, other than you weird Comblock guys, really wanted to fill.
Yeah, we'll be at the Last Bash. We haven't signed up yet, but obviously I'm just slacking. We're going to be at Clash Bash in October. I got invited to Suppress Fest, but we're not going to go to that one. That's in Florida. But y'all be there. Well, BDC will be there. I don't know who's going. And then we'll be at SHOT, and then we have a night shoot on January 18th at SHOT in the desert. It's not announced yet, so I can't go into detail on it, but it's a private event. If you're in the Vegas area, you can pay to get in. It's going to be on sale beforehand. I don't know when they're going to launch it. I believe they're going to launch in the next month or so, but it's all under night vision, machine guns, tons of vendors out there. But like I said, more to follow on that one. But we'll be out there for that on January the 18th. I think it's going to be out in Henderson, if y'all are familiar with that area.
No, man, I just go to the casinos. I don't think I've been outside the casinos.
Well, I know y'all see I do a lot of work with like Lon Wick and Jay the Shooter and Knock Them Outdoors. They'll be out there. It's their group, if I should. Any hinting, that's what should be going on out there. Big Daddy Unlimited, probably.
That sounds about right. For Jack down here at the bottom, I just saw him say, that we're not important enough to go. I don't think that it's just they make it where it's only obviously people in the industry. You get vetted and all of that nonsense. And while there's this level of it's all people in the industry or whatnot, it's also just a lot of chance for people to get together and things of that nature. So for a lot of us, it's part vacation, part work. Part a little bit of part of everything. It's nice to see people and what they're working on and things of that nature. So, don't feel left out. You'll probably get to go at some point in your life if you ever make friends or start your own business or get hired at a business or everything. I think it's one of those things that's nice to go to like one time, maybe twice.
Right. It's a thing that if you've never gone, it's a big shocker your first time. I went in 2020 right before COVID, and it's one of those things where it's not where, I'm not important enough. Like, I was no one. I didn't know. It was just who you know and who could get you in, right? Because I've always wanted to go there. And I was there that week and knew some people that could get me in, had some extra passes for their company, and went in, and I was like shell-shocked by first time going there. I was like, holy shit, this is badass. How am I going to do this in 3 days? Like, or 4 days, There's no way. You're like, you go to all the big rooms, the medium-sized rooms, and you're like, what the fuck? What do you mean? Where's everybody else at? Well, you're not thinking that, but you're like, where's KSA or where's this or where's that? And they're like, oh, they're in the basement. You're like, in the basement? There's what? You got to go down this staircase, and now there's a massive other room? You're like, shit, it took me a day to do the big rooms, a day to do the medium rooms, and now there's a basement that's like the same size as the big rooms? Shit. And if you know anybody that might be going or anything like that, I mean, don't be scared to ask to hop in, this, that, the other. It's like I said, that honestly pushed me, like being a gun collector and just shooting, to getting my first suppressor to now I have the opportunity to go to SHOT Show. Now I'm gauging, getting more interest. And now you're like, hey, now look where I'm at, right? It all started. If I hadn't gone to SHOT Show, I wouldn't be as interested in it as I am today, right? You never know where it's going to go. And then to follow that, go down to Chris over at Suppress Nation. Will you have to run a Unity mount to see over it? Surprisingly enough, You can run this on a bolt action, you can run this on an AR, and you can clear the sights. On a scope, on a 270 Tikka, you can barely see it in the bottom. It's not going to affect your reticle at all, which we were blown away. I thought we were going to put this on an AR and we weren't even going to be able to see over like a damn EOTech. Or EOTech wouldn't even be able to see over the thing, but surprisingly, it's just enough. But yep, shocked me. Imagine this thing with an ugly ass chemo hanging off the back of it. That'd look ridiculous. Especially with that ugly new JMac 24mm mount. Oh my god. Me and Justin are cool, but
people are loving that thing though, and I don't understand it either. Like,
it is $174. Get out of here.
Yeah, I don't know either. And then I know you and I talked a little bit in private before the stream, but I know people love fucking chemo. I mean, and I'm friends with Todd, and I like Mike and all those guys, but Darren always puts it I think the best. It's a great idea, but the execution on it was poor, and you get a lot of, I mean, subpar materials. You have a lot of failures. It wears out pretty quick. The muzzle devices tend to not meter very well. I mean, that's a blanket statement because there's so many muzzle devices at this point. You can't really, classify them all, with one quick sentence. But, man, I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of people love that it ratchets and all that, and that sounds really cool. It always reminds me of putting a playing card in my spokes on a bicycle and thinking it's a dirt bike or something, But at the end of the day, if you're really trying to do a job, I just think there's better choices, unfortunately. But a lot of people are pretty heavily invested in chemo, and they believe in chemo, and I doubt it's going to change. But if anyone's on the fence, I personally would steer away from it. But everyone's different.
Yeah, I think it's very expensive, especially when you get into multiple cans and you're spending $250 on each individual mount. And then you're adding a muzzle device on top of that. Like, you can have like 4 rear ends for the price of a chemo setup with a muzzle device practically. And then going back to that is, this is a question for the people watching. What do we think the standard mount should be that is included with the Putnik? JMac has reached out to us on including mounts with it, their X37 line, as well as Rearden. I've been trying to get Darren to make a Rearden 0 for this damn thing because I don't want it. A regular Atlas looks kind of weird when it's coming off at that angle. And then you get an XL that looks even more ridiculous. So I've been telling him, I'm like, make us an Atlas 0. And he's like, I'm doing it. Same thing with the Atlas Alpha. I know I'm giving away all Darren's secrets here on what he's working on. But I'm just saying, you can run an Alpha on your RSP. You can put this on your 300 Blackout and shoot subs. I put it on my chopped down 300 Blackout Rigger American. And this is a slim little guy, and it's only 8 ounces. It's even lighter when you take the piston and put like an Alpha mount on here. I run the Echo Alpha mount on them right now on a 300 Blackout subgun. Or, not subgun, subsonics. And then, yeah, that's what I'm saying. I probably just snitched out, Darren's products on what he's working on, but Alpha Rearden mount and 0 Bravo mount. But you didn't hear it from me. Nobody going to run to him and be like, "Where's the Bravo? Where's the Alpha?" Yeah, he's gonna call me in the morning.
I designed a couple mounts I wanted Darren to make for pistol related stuff. And he's just he's just the best in the business, literally, at making this shit. But there's only so much of him to go around, unfortunately, and that's the problem, Just only so much production capacity. And then for someone who just asked, Joe, any plans to design a mount? Has Dead Air offered to have you help? Dead Air would never go outside of their realm ever. It doesn't matter if you have the $1 trillion idea. They're never going to branch out and be like, I know some people who have even said, "Hey, you guys should look at this and go talk to so and so," and they don't do it. And I get it. I mean, they have their company, they've got their success, and they've got their way of doing things, and that's that's them. That's we kind of have a little bit of a different model where we're more open with helping and stuff. But at the end of the day, I would rather see Darren design a mount. Me and Darren, for example, have spitballed tons of ideas. I know Andrew has spitballed tons of ideas with Darren as well. I mean, the mounts are in Darren's lane. That's his thing. My personal thing about mounts, if we did design anything, would be to keep it extremely simple, and add just a couple things that basically the Atlas lacks, just because of the fact it was an improvement on an existing design, right? It was Plan B, and Plan B, of course, was pretty good. I've used Plan B for a very long time, but then Darren addressed some of the problems and fixed a lot of those things. But there's only so much you can do without a total redesign from the ground up. Scaling up probably a little bit, but still keeping things small, changing some threads and some dimensions here and there. So that's his department. That's his department. And that's how it's gonna stay, unless I think of just something crazy off the wall or whatever.
Yeah, I have one of those off the wall ones, but y'all would all think I'm crazy. It's one of those ideas that y'all wouldn't agree with. A dual tapered muzzle device.
You know what? I've got a 3-taper one in my brain. So.
Get out of here. Yeah, I've been talking about a dual taper similar to a Helios blast chamber. You kind of get the gist of where I'm going with this. So, dual taper, right? One on the tip, one on the base, and your muzzle device ports directly into your coaxial vents and doesn't go down center line.
Have you ever looked at what elevated silence does with their muzzle devices?
I've heard of them, but I don't remember who they are off the top of my head. I'll look them up real quick.
I don't know if you're going to be able to find any cutaways on the internet, but I'll try to send you one after the. I'm going to have to dig it up in my database of bullshit, but
it's similar to like what I'm talking about.
So what they do is they fully encapsulate the muzzle device. So when the muzzle device goes in the suppressor, it uses kind of a mishmash of like Omega baffles, sort of. But the point is that everything that vents out the sides of the device is sealed off from the rest of the stack, so therefore it's venting into a coaxial area. So sort of along those lines. I know I think it ballistic. What's it? Ballistic advance? No, ballistic research. They do something interesting too with their muzzle devices, where it's encapsulated in like a cage once it's in the suppressor, but then it goes into a monocore, and I don't know. Some people really like those cans. They definitely, for a monocore, from what I've looked at, I mean, they've tried to incorporate some features to definitely make them better. That's for sure. But there's just only so much you can, of course, do with a monocore,
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, it's hard for, like I said, Form 1 people is to, like, let's say like the old Gen Queltec Flow, like the Gen 1, something like that. It's very hard. Like, I'd say that can's very outdated now. Very, very outdated. So I see it a lot now, even with like Form 1 pages and shit like that. They're like, oh man, put a coax. Everything, you say coax and it's like a fucking catch-all. They're like, oh, it's fucking got coax. It's going to be great. Like, no.
Flow, bro. Put the word flow in it.
Put a flow in it, and it's gonna be great. So that shit drives me crazy, because I tried many and many and many different coax on many different calibers, this, that, and the other, and it's like, even the Form 1 world, it's like, man, why are you being the way that you're being? Why do you think that that's gonna be good, or this, that, and the other? It's, you have to know what the pressure. What's your goal, right? Well, short barrel, long barrel, bolt action, gas gun, piston gun, gas impingement gun. What's your blast chamber size? You're trying to run universal mounts. And I think that's also another big thing that I hate and I love at the same time. Everyone wants universal mounting, but we would have a totally different level of cans if we didn't have universal mounting, right? So if we could take, like, let's say, like the Helios direct thread or a Hyperion, right, where it has almost ultimately no blast chamber per se. If we could take that into the kind of manufacturing that we currently have, where we're machining, we're not, none of us are 3D printing yet that I know of, right? So that whole perspective of what can I do inside the blast chamber? How can I affect it? Because everything starts right there at that bare muzzle, right? And we're all now having to tend to the community with saying, oh, it's universal mounting. Oh, it can take a tri-lug, or oh, it can take this, or oh, it can take that. But now we're sacrificing suppressibility in some cases to universal mounting. Joe's like, I
Yeah,
don't care.
I
We'll
mean,
run
yeah,
whatever we want.
no, I agree. I agree, but then there's also, of course, solutions. I mean, you look at again, we go back to the Atlas and kind of what Riley's got with his little minimal deal. I mean, you can get something still universal, but very short as well if you do it right. You just wouldn't be able to use the chemos, the YHMs, and all that
Right.
bullshit of the world, which I mean, for me, I don't care. That's not a big deal.
Yeah, I prefer smaller blast chambers on rifle stuff, even on supers.
And it really depends, of course, on the overall.
Right. It all goes back to the
design.
geometry and how they can set up.
If you're, I mean, a lot of people I think don't realize what the blast chamber is doing for one, and then so when you go to like that coax design, that your Hyperions or whatever, I mean, you're able to shorten that considerably because you've given a path for that pressure to go into in an alternative way. Look at the OSS though. I mean, when we talk about flow cans, right? The new OSS. Why did it suddenly get so drastically better? Well, they added more restriction to the can. I mean, that's what they did. They added it, and they timed it in a way that it's delayed enough when they do start additional gas clamping on that gas that it's no longer flowing straight out the end of the can nearly as much as it did. So there's this weird balance between how much you can flow versus at some point, no matter what, you have to slow gases down, and that's the name of the game. And there's lots of different approaches, whether it be spirals, so it's giving it this long pathway before it does get out, or whether it be venting, selective venting, like we've just been doing on the Patreon, or something like the Hyperion is doing, where it's basically kind of dividing the charge up. So part of it is bypassing part of the can, then still clamping in the last part. There's only so much time too where the bullet is in the can, and that's where your pressures are going to be the highest. Where you really can do certain things. I gotta kind of tiptoe around a few things, but
right.
I think you probably get the idea, and hopefully our viewers here get a little bit of the idea that it's a balance. Just saying, flow through or whatever. There's more to it than that.
Right, your blast chamber size is going to reference how much pressure is going through your coax or the geometry is being used. And you're right, you have to time it as well, right? Time goes back to how much pressure and what that size is going to allow that pressure to do as it's going down the can. Rather than just being like, oh, we have this massive blast chamber, now my coax is doing nothing. Or now I have this super amount of gas coming back into the gun as the action opens and dumping it all into the action rather than getting that perfectly fine-tuned scenario.
I'm not 100% sure on this person's question. They're saying, what outer diameter tolerance would you say is ideal for the hole on a cup? Would .01 be realistic for practical implementation? All I can think of is maybe they're saying what size bore in the cup and how much overbore over the caliber. and 0.01 would be drastically too little. That's another thing. There's a lot of confusion too. Like, a lot of people think you should make the smallest hole in the cup as possible. That's not always the case either, because if you start restricting too much, right, then you also get into some issues with bullet stability, things of that nature. So my personal rule of thumb, especially when you're a manufacturer, it also is a big deal because now you're running the risk of baffle strikes and warranty stuff, and a lot of people don't probably realize that manufacturers, we don't always get to optimize things to that minuscule degree because of that type of stuff. So my rule is typically 50 thou over bullet diameter. Feel free to add anything to that, Tyler.
I was going to bring up the discussion today about the obsidian and the known in-cap strikes, and now we're going off of the face of the baffle and the geometry of the baffle, destabilizing 9mm. So, it's like the RSP in testing, right? At certain links, it would start to do the same thing as an obsidian. It was almost like it was mimicking it almost perfectly. And it goes back to, do you open up the bore of that end cap? Is that destabilization causing accuracy issues? Is it one every so many rounds? Is it when the can gets too pressurized? What is causing all those issues? So we actually had to get around that issue. We had the same issue that Rugged is allowing all of its cans to go out the door with, and we fixed that issue. So I don't know, you might have saw Brandon when he tested the RSP on the Pulse for the very first time. He was like, man, did you send this to me, the end cap strike? And it was like the version 1, prototype 1 of the RSP. And I was like, nope, that was all you. So that's when we realized we had an issue. And then the second prototype we did the burn down on, and we opened it up, we changed a few things, and we were like, haven't seen it since. I haven't seen a single RSP end cap strike since. We've had 2 warranty claims. And they were both dealers on machine guns, and they were out of spec tri-lugs from YHM on RS9s, smacking end caps. Just too much tolerance playing on a tri-lug. Did I say smaller blast chambers for rifle rounds? This is kind of more in correlation to what baffle design you're using on a style of coax. I wouldn't say on like a typical like 50-degree cone. I wouldn't just say, hey, we're running all solid 50-degree cones. Let's run a super small blast chamber. I wouldn't necessarily do that. Or like, let's say like 5.56, I wouldn't run a super small blast chamber. But typically on 308, I wouldn't say a small blast chamber, but I would say smaller than typical. Like the Enticer, for example, has what looks like a massive blast chamber. I wouldn't say it looks like it. It is pretty big.
It's 2.5 from the end of the can.
Right.
So it's actually smaller than.
I like that. Inch and 5/8 to right under inch and 3/4, that kind of spectrum. But it all goes back to what baffle design are you using with it.
Well, it also goes to, are you using this on a bolt gun or semi-full auto?
Right.
Bolt gun, you can, especially in rifle, like I would design a 308 or a 6.5 Creedmoor rifle can, dedicated bolt gun can, with a blast chamber different than I would on a can that I knew was going to be seeing probably quite a bit of semi and full automatic fire. Like a production can, like Enticer. You know what I mean? Where if you're going to go back to it and just make it where, all right, people, Enticer is just bolt guns only, well then we'd probably pull a half of an inch off of it and go something closer to where the Nomad's at with around a 2-inch splash chamber, right? Because we don't have to worry about those types of things. You know, we don't have to worry about back pressure as much and bolt timing and all that kind of stuff. So it goes to, again, back to that thing we were talking about earlier in the very kind of middle to beginning of the video, where we as a community tend to use, okay, I should buy a 22 suppressor, a 9mm, or a 45 suppressor, and then maybe a 30 cal board suppressor and use it on everything. And then maybe later I'll get a dedicated 5.56 can or whatever, you know. But really, you can really, if you want to get optimal stuff, you can break it down way further than that, but it's not always feasible because you have to have enough sales to justify it as well, you know.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Like going back to the beginning with the RS9 and RSP is, and same with the Putnik, is we're really. It goes back to the Enticer as well. Is do you want a general purpose can, because that now broadens your market, right? Now I can sell to a hog hunter. I can sell to a guy that's hiking up a mountain. I can do this, that, and the other. Or you go to the opposite end of the spectrum, which is really risky, is to be that kind of like niche per se, is to say like, do I want to go for a full bolt gun can and market this as a full bolt gun can? Do I want to make it a moderate can that does the do all? Do I want to make it a gas gun, piston gun, like the Putnik being really good on piston guns? But like I said, I'm openly honest saying that it sucks on a gas and pinch-wing gun. Like, where do you want to go with it, right? You're limiting yourself as a company if you make a can that's directly associated with something and you don't have a lot of SKUs. If you have like 3 SKUs and you're like, hey, here's our rifle can, but it's only for bolt guns, then you're killing your market, right? Versus if you say, hey, I have 14 SKUs, this is our bolt gun can and this is our gas gun can. You as a company are allowed to do that. And I think that's the approach we're more leaning towards. And we're going to take the risk of not having a crazy amount of SKUs, is we're going to make a can that's more lenient towards a bolt or more lenient towards a gas. But then at the same time, we're at that decision-making point where do I go with the can that's badass on a bolt gun, or do I go with the can that's really fucking good on a gas gun, really fucking good on a bolt gun? I don't want that can, like, I'm not going to hate on Andrew, but I'm going to hate on Andrew. This fucking can sucks on a gas gun, without a doubt. So you look at Pew Science and you're like, oh my God, the hydrogen does really well. You're on a fucking bolt gun. You put this on an AR-10, you're going to wring your shit. You're going to be like, why did I make this decision? But Andrew does this as a PRS can, as a this can, as a that can. But the problem is when you have companies like Pew Science, I'm not hating on Jay or anything, but you're showing one side of the data. You're not showing all of the data, right? People get on there, well, this is the best 308 can, this is the best 308 can, this is the best 308 can. Well, what's the best 308 can for my platform, right?
Yeah,
so
I totally agree.
Right. So it's kind of one-sided at this point. And I've asked Jay, I'm like, hey, are you going to do SCAR testing? It's like, oh, well, I don't know if I'm going to do SCAR testing. And I'm like, well, let me know, because I would love to show the opposite end of the spectrum, right? This is just one of many. I'm not hating on Andrew or anything like that, but this goes back to it, is like the Enticer is a well-balanced can, I would say. The hydrogen is leaning way more on the bolt gun side than a gas gun dramatically. And I think Andrew markets that as such. Like, hey, put this on a bolt gun, put this on this, put it on that. Or same with his polonium. He leans more towards a gassier can. That's just the way Andrew does his rifle cans currently. Is everything's leaning toward, I can't speak for the Occam 5, but the polonium and the hydrogen both reflect that they have higher back pressure.
No, they do. I even went as far as, because I was so curious about it after the results, you know, I'd done all my vented testing to date, and then, you know, what I call high gas capture storage cones, which is basically the style of cone Andrew's using. So I said, you know what, I'm going to build my own, basically, version, but I'm not going to pack as many cans as he did to hopefully see what happens. And that's what led to, okay, well, this is kind of gassy, you know, and all of that. Gets great fucking muzzle numbers, that's for sure, a lot of times, or at least pretty good ones, depending on what you're shooting. But then we've kind of gone down the little bit of the yellow brick road and tried to now kind of fix some of those things. And I think he's actually working on a lot of the same stuff, it looks like. But we've looked at, you know, selective venting and porting and trying to kind of dial it back down. At the end of the day, I think if you are going to use that style of cone he's using, you'd be better off mixing it with another style of cone, as well as porting some of it and things of that nature. And it you know, it gives him a roadmap, at least for what he could do to even make his cans even better than they are, for sure. But I want to answer one thing real quick, Tyler. So was there a Patreon video about blast chamber size for rifle cans? Yeah, a lot of stuff, especially older stuff, was taken down for a bunch of selective reasons. I've gone over it in a bunch of different videos. Long story short, when we're talking mostly semi-automatics, right? that video basically found us to be in the 2.25 to 2.5 inch range. 5.56, maybe a little bit bigger. But again, this again falls back on no first cone venting, especially no coaxial, and no bolt gun. Right. So I've pretty much openly said, bolt guns we can run on the smaller side. Coaxial, we definitely can run on the smaller side. So there's a bunch of info still on that. I've actually done a bunch of updated videos on how I build cans, why I build cans the way I build cans. And I think one thing a lot of people miss on the Patreon is this is a research type thing, right? So what works today, we're always trying to make better. So things change, right? The information is evolving. It's not just, okay, this works, fuck it, this is going to be the recommendation forever. That's not what it is, and that's not how it should be, in my opinion, for sure.
So I see something on here about what makes a can difference better on a gas gun versus a bolt gun. So a lot of it's weird, but the Form 1 community as a whole creates this like kind of hype when something happens. I'm like, oh, flow cans are what you need for a gas gun, or what you need for this, that, or the other. Well, everybody's been making cans that weren't flow through this, that, and the other for a long time, and there's great cans out there that are not coax, that are perfectly fine for a gas gun. I mean, we are getting to the point now with bolt guns where typically you're like, oh, I might not use a coax. I might just try to, like the hydrogen, right? Like, let's try to keep it as simple as possible and get the best results we can. But now on the other end of the spectrum where DDC is and where we're at in our testing is now we can get way better results with a coaxial style can or whatever style you want to call it, whatever. Each individual person does it different. But you can now get better results than you typically would with just that basic baffle design. And then you're sitting there going, well, is it good on a gas gun? Is it not good on a gas gun? And we've gotten to the point now where we have 2 prototypes and you'll have 2 and you go test them and you're like, man, this one does just as good on the bolt gun as it does on the gas gun. You're like, it's a miracle. It's perfect, right? It's a perfect scenario. Then you got this other one over here and you're like, well, what's different from these 2 cans? Because now this one sucks completely, this other choice. So you have to go into the fine, minute details of how much porting do I have? Where's the port happening at? What is the blast chamber size? What mount am I using versus like direct thread, right? Like direct thread is going to be obviously different than any other muzzle device that you're typically going to put out there. Also, is my mount adding more blast chamber space like a Chemo or an Atlas XL, or what other mount uses like a crazy big blast chamber or adds more, I should say, like that giant CGS adapter that Andrew loves to make memes about. But stuff like that, right? So when you get down to the nitty gritty, there's not like a clear and cut answer, but I would say everything is shifting towards coax. But this goes back to not all coax is good. You have to regulate it in certain areas and make that geometry and pressure work for you. If you have too big a blast chamber, you're not getting the most out of your geometry. If you have too small, it's more back pressure at the shooter's ear. If you're not bending the correct way, or if the holes are too big, if the holes are too small, the amount of holes, the orientation of the holes, it's all a big fucking trial and error, because there's not just a fucking list of, hey, this works good, because it might work good on one application. It's completely fucking opposite for the other, or the host weapon. So getting down to the nitty gritty, I would say, in my experience and the B team's experience, I should say, I'm not saying 100%, is that coax and more intricate geometry and geometrical testing, we are finding that we can get these cans that work way better than typical baffle designs on both platforms. It's just whether or not what you do with that geometry that affects whether or not it's going to be good on a gas gun and going to be good on a bolt gun. So baffle designs as a whole, you can't just take and say all coaxes are good. You have to say, what is the rest of this can and how is this coax designed? Because you make shitty coax all fucking day. Trust me, I have like 12 cans that are just ass. And then I have another fucking 12 that are like, these motherfuckers are working good. So, not all coax is good. If I could be like, coax is a piece of shit sometimes, it'll piss you off.
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion. I always get a kick out of when someone posts like an image of some intricate design on the internet, and they go, "Man, that thing must be good." A lot of times, simpler can be better,
Right.
and just because there are multiple acts. I mean, look at the very first generation of OSS cans, right? It couldn't get more confusing inside of a suppressor, but those things were fucking complete ass. They were dog shit, you know.
Mm-hmm.
It's taken them a long time to then bring back and incorporate features that kind of are almost more not coax to then make them where they're at now, and it's just like you've just said. I mean, it's all trial and error. It's tough, it's really really tough, and that's the thing. You can't abandon a design either the first time you try it. You can't, because you can adapt it and you can suddenly make changes and find that a certain design can go fucking 180 on you if you add, get those clips right, get that spacing right, get porting right or whatever. It's amazing how much difference the small things can really do. Um, so based on what you just said about Pew Science ratings and host type and all that, what's a good balance resource and overall performance? So I'm going to start and then I'll let you finish. We weren't saying that the data is bad or any way. Like that's not true. What we're saying is you can't look at the results and say just a 30 cal bolt gun test and go, this is the best Canon 308 bolt gun, and then assume that it's going to be great on every other application. You got to take it all, and that's one of the reasons why on my channel we don't just test a can on one thing, right? We tested on a bunch of different calibers to look at the different results because it does change. And then the other thing is you got to also pay close attention to what mounts they're using in every single test, because results on a different mount and a different muzzle device are completely different. So it would be nice to see them standardize, but it's probably not going to happen. But I'll kick it off to you now.
So I kind of disagree with the standardized mounting. I mean, I see it as if you're going to keep it it just kind of depends on the platform. So if you get into bolt actions, right? If it's what it's shipping with out of the box is what I expect to see the results with. But if I'm going changing in mounts and I'm now, you might degrade a can per se by your mount choice. You know what I'm saying? You might have a can that's designed specifically for a mount that's designed specifically for. Picked up the wrong fucking one.
Well, technically, they both are, right? But no, so, and I agree with you, but it's unfortunate though, because it's been taken now to be that this design is what it is, and that's it. Instead of, I guess I would just like a disclaimer. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah. That's what I really want more than anything.
I see it as well, you tested this with a Rearden and it comes with a direct thread. So now I'm going to have to buy a Rearden to get the same performance that you tested with? Or am I getting what the can comes with, how it comes out of the box as the manufacturer intended? Is it better because of the Rearden? Is it better because of this mount? Is it worse because of this mount? And I had a big, long, I wouldn't say long, but had a discussion, about this with Pew Science, and he was like, man, we want to use standardized mounts on the MP5s. And I was like, no. I was like, you're not going to do it. I designed a mount to work with a can, and you're going to put something that I haven't tested, that I didn't design, on a can. What are you going to do, right? We see mounts across the board. Just because a certain person likes a certain mount, this goes back to, I think certain mounts kill a can. I would not necessarily kill it, but dilute it down to what its pure performance would be. Shout out to pure performance right there.
No, yeah. I mean, your scenario is extremely like that because you've designed a can around a mount, around a pit, around a certain scenario. And 9mm is kind of different, right? Because you're not in that whole QD world really for the most part, where when you get into rifle cans, everyone wants hub threads, to use XYZ MNOP mounting systems. So the variables are just so endless. And I guess that's my thing is I would love it if they came out and just said, look, here, or even just every once in a while, let's say every 5 tests that come out, they go, okay, we're going to redo 2 cans on 3 different mounts and show you how drastically different the results are. And my own conversations, just like you've had with them, they know that mounts are going to, and muzzle devices affect cans greatly, so, but the general public tends to overlook a lot of this. I think a lot of people log in, they go to the bottom of the page, they look at the little chart at the bottom, and they go, okay, this guy's number 1 today, and miss some of the finer points of all this. It's great information. I love the information. I love Jay. I love what he's doing. But it also has, some dangerous sides to it as well.
Right. Like, let's say you take like the Otter Creek lithium, right? And you put a YHM trilug in it, right? And then you go and test, like, let's say the Obsidian and you use an Obsidian trilug, or vice versa, like wanting to put a YHM in an RS9, this, that, and the other. And I specifically told them, like, depending on, you're giving more towards the companies that designed their own mount around their can, rather than taking like the Otter Creek's lithium and you go put a YHM mount on it to test with it. Well, if he doesn't have any testing behind that, or he could have designed a trilug that was perfectly designed around that can. So in my eyes, like, if he wanted to test ours with a trilug, I would want to design a trilug for him to test with. I guess that's my point as a manufacturing standpoint, rather than being like, hey, we just grabbed a random trilug off the shelf and now we're shooting with it. Like, obviously I can design a better trilug than these guys. I'm not saying that, but that's pretty much what I'm saying. And it went back to it. This isn't public, but after we had the discussion, I was like, hey, I don't want you using a trilug. I want you to show how it comes out of the box, its performance, exactly as I intended it to be designed. And he came back after our testing, which, is completed. I'm not going to see any results or anything like that. But he said, hey, it's just crazy, but you're right. Like, I went out of my way and tested it with the mount I said I was going to use that you didn't want me to use, and you were right. The data reflects it. And I was like, and he apologized. He was like, okay, I'm glad you brought that up to me. And I was like, yeah. That's the way it was designed. That's the way I wanted it to be used.
Yeah, when he first started Pew, I obviously I was all for it. I jumped in. I've been a paying member ever since because I believe that we should have multiple places testing cans, in a way that is good. You know what I mean? But that was like my first concern when we started testing cans. I'm like, okay, today you tested this can and it was on this, and then and like, I get it. You want kind of what's out of the box, but again, some cans are designed to just be used on any mount. The manufacturer, the manufacturer hasn't put any thought into that at all, right? And then other people, like yourself for one, or CGS with the Mod 9 for another, they put a lot of thought into what was going to be mounted, and that relationship and all of that. So I've tried to highlight that, at least in my own, realm and all of that. But
like the entire
we'll kind of move on here. Will we see 300 black subs cans come to market? Most companies seem to build for gas or bolt or some middle ground. Generally, I don't know. Maybe, but I don't think so. Most places don't want to deal with it. Most places want to just. Everyone wants to have as few SKUs technically as possible, and remember, all of these places are businesses. They're meant to make money. They're not really looking to make cans, because when they make it too specialized, that means they're not going to sell as many of those cans. First off, volume of a certain can is what makes the money, right? They can make enough of it that they can make a price point low enough. And I got to remember, too, that the dealer selling the can, they got to make money, too. And they want to have as much margin in the cans as possible, too. So it's all a little bit of capitalism as well as anything. You might see some of the smaller companies at some point, like anyone in our little group, come out with, a sub suppressor for X, Y, or Z. That's probably possible. But we got to get all the normal stuff off the ground first, right? That all that has to be successful before you can go and start adding the more minutia type stuff.
Yeah, we're not silencer code with like 30 different SKUs. Like them, they said
Unless it's
they make the
pistons.
Osprey twice a year.
Unless it's pistons. Silencer only wants one SKU on pistons, apparently.
Yeah, apparently so. But like there, when I spoke to them at the NRA show, they said, "Yeah, we only make Ospreys twice a year." I was like, "What?" They're like, "Yeah, there's really no demand for them, but when we sell them, they sell quick because the demand's there twice a year. You can't get them all year, and then all of a sudden they pop up. Everybody's gonna buy them." And I was like, "That's crazy." Are there any advantage to using 3D simulation? Well, I would say there's no way to replicate your exact setup and your exact caliber, your exact pressure, your exact ammo. All of that simultaneously in a system per se currently. Unless you can find like a what's the word here? We use like a medium, like a can that's always the same, or you use a powder that's always the same, you use a brass that's always the same, you use this that's always the same. You could get close, but I don't think you could find something that's super efficient. You might have a different opinion on it, but I think it'd be very hard to replicate in a 3D model, not 3D model, 3D simulation, what is actually happening on your exact platform, on your exact barrel length, on your exact powder, barrel, primer, bullet, projectile, case, seating, overall length. There's so many different parameters there. It'd be on wall thickness, material composition. It could be this material is fucking slightly has more nickel in this section than the next one. Vibrations, fucking so many different things that go into that.
So I used to be 100% against any CFM or anything of that nature. I've come around a little bit. A lot of it is really due to Darren because he's been getting access to some, higher level stuff. But even then, you're absolutely right. It can only still take you so far. You can come up with the design, you can run it, you can kind of see what might be going on, maybe make some tweaks here and there, kind of fine tune some things possibly, and that still doesn't mean it's going to be beneficial. And there's literally, at least in suppressors, from what I've seen and found, there's just no replacement for trial and error. There just really isn't.
Right.
There's just so many variables. There's just too many variables, and what takes place inside a suppressor is just so unique. You've got this bullet flying through and blocking off apertures for a couple milliseconds. You've got all of these different burn rates and stuff and you try to predict unburnt powder igniting in a can. Like, just try to predict that one thing. Like, think about how many variables are around. Go out and shoot a short-barreled rifle. He disconnected himself again. Got to quit knocking that cord, but I'll finish. Go out and shoot a short-barreled rifle. Just testing flash with different muzzle devices. And you'll see just how different it'll be shot to shot. Some shots will... You disconnected yourself again, I see. You're a fucking mess. But anyway, I was saying, go out and shoot even just muzzle devices with a short barrel rifle, and you'll see some will flash, some won't, That same shit's taking place in cans. Like, there's so many variables and things going on. It's just nuts. So, you can use it to try to... you can use it to try to see a little bit of stuff. Like, I don't think it's worthless. But it's just not. I don't think what we would all hope it to be.
Right.
And to get access to the real good stuff, which is really the only stuff that does anything at all, we're talking a lot of money, like a lot of money, a lot of times. So.
Sig money.
Yeah, it's like stupid money. And a lot of people think like these big companies, your Silencer Co's, your SIGs and stuff, do like some crazy R&D, but a lot of times they're doing the same thing all of us are doing. Trial and error. That's what a lot of them are doing. And some of them, you're only going to, even with trial and error testing, you still have to be able to dream up the solution. And if you can't think of new ideas, you're still never going to go anywhere either, you know?
Yeah, I'd say buying a silencer co or buying a dead air can is like driving a fucking Toyota Camry. No offense to anybody that drives a Toyota Camry, it's just you're in that middle of the road, right? You're not getting the best, you're not getting the worst, you're getting a good item with a good reliability, good warranty on it, but at the end of the day, it's not the best of this or that. It's just the most sold, the most available, most marketed, this, that, and the other. On to this question. Volume too large. You think engine 3/4 tube is too large for 300 Blackout Supers? I think 300 Blackout Supers is a different animal compared to like 556 or 308. I would design. You can have a good 308 can that's good on 300 Blackout Supers, but it all just depends on what you do in the can. I don't think it's too large. I prefer. It just all depends on how small the blast chamber is, how your spacing, right? Because what you're doing with that volume, all that extra volume you're having there, and what you're constricting, how much you're constricting. Like I said, I sound very repetitive when I say make the pressure and geometry work for you. But if you get that too far away, you're just losing that geometry. You're losing those holes. You're losing everything you design those baffles to do when you get too large. Or if you get too tight and there's too much pressure, it just feeds back into the gun or it dumps out at the muzzle. You have to find a happy medium. So you can get larger diameter stuff, and a lot of people think, like for the Putnik, for example, is, I can go short and I can go fat and it's going to be just as quiet. This has been like the longest fucking discussion ever about, do I do a long can or a short and stubby can? Well, this 100% proves that you try to shoot like 300 blackout subs through this. It's fucking ass. You shoot through 8, it's good. It's not fucking, it's fucking, I'm way better than my 8-inch. Like, no, it's just not there. So when you have a larger diameter like that, you have to make it work to your advantage. You're having that volume, you might as well do something with it. You not just be like, on an 1.5-inch can, I do 10 baffles, 1/2-inch space, static space. But when you have 1 3/4, you're gonna have to get tighter. You're gonna have to regulate that pressure, and it matters a whole lot more in the front of the can, like towards the blast chamber and the blast baffle when that pressure's high, than it does more on the rear end. I'm not saying don't forget the rear end of the can, but I'm saying that pressure is going to matter the most when it's at its highest.
Well, and it also, there's a big difference even going from a welded core can to a tube can.
Yep.
Or, is it coaxial or is it normal standard cone design? That plays a huge part too, because coaxial, you might have the center portion of the stack be your typical size of stack, right? So
Right.
it's just, there's a lot of variables. We'll try to wrap this up here since I'm starting to lose my voice, and I'm sure you're ready to go. Talking about the CFM, they were talking about some, the Intel's coming out with bigger chips or faster and more efficient artificial intelligence chips, and then that Form 1, and the only reason I'm even sharing this is just to say, we all think like these things trickle down pretty quickly, but they don't. And this can all take place, and Form 1 can get the most amazing simulations ever, but for it to trickle down to the suppressor industry, I mean, look at 3D printing DMLS, right? I don't know if you guys know this, but even the people who are putting out cans that are DMLS are having them made all by the same people, because it's literally not affordable for most companies to buy their own equipment to do it themselves in-house. It's just not. So even that is going to still take quite a bit of time to become mainstream. So that's where I'm going to leave that.
Any more questions?
Man, I think that's it. I think we can call this a wrap. So thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Yep.
I know it was a trying live stream, but we'll talk more about that later. Everyone, thank you for being here for this live stream. Have a great weekend, and we'll be signing out for the night. So, see you, Ty.
See ya.